Much to my chagrin, there are more manifestos during this election, and the one I want to cover today comes from a party that typically only ever gets one seat, in Parliament. They normally get quite a few council seats, but not enough to affect any real discernible change. So when they come up with manifestos, it's certainly worth having a look. I will link, by the way, the manifesto in question down below. This year's manifesto has some talking points, and I think we should address all of them. The first is to spend £100 billion a year to cut emissions, with their target to cut greenhouse gas emissions to zero to tackle climate change, or shift the burden of this from us, so that nobody else can then say, you're contributing. Now, all parties have promised action on climate change, but understandably, since they're called the Green Party, theirs is the most radical by far. While it was the Conservative Party that passed a law obliging the UK to halt all greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, and Labour obviously trying to aim earlier than 2050, the Liberal Democrats 2045, the Greens want it by 2030, so 10 years. The Advisory Committee on Climate Change, which provides independent advice to government, says 2050 is the earliest credible date to achieve net zero emissions for most sectors of the economy. These targets apply to the whole of the UK, by the way. It is unsure whether or not they're intending, the Greens that is, to only focus on England or all of the United Kingdom. Granted, it is quite an ambitious and radical position to hold. They're never going to be in power anyway. Caroline Lucas has been their sole MP for quite some time. Second, invest £6 billion in the NHS, which means an increase in their current spending until 2030, with a £1 billion per year to be used for nurses' higher education. However, a big gaping mistake in all of this is the assumption that this is what the NHS will need in a decade from now. There is a push for devolution of healthcare to local communities, but there can be wide variations in quality in different areas, and removing national-level scrutiny may not be in the best interests of the patients. It should be noted Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland all run their own health services, but under the Greens' proposition, they will all benefit from extra funding. 3. Remove fossil fuels from the economy. A carbon tax will apply to all oil and gas extraction and to the use of petrol, diesel and aviation fuels. This will raise consumer prices and frequent flyers will face a levy, with petrol and diesel cars being phased out by 2030. Because we've got so much lithium to use, yo. We can totally have electric cars forever. This, however, does not apply to the whole of the UK, because Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have some freedom in how they implement their own policies. Next, plant 700 million trees by 2030. I'm okay with them doing that. Plant all those trees. Plant more, actually. Let's rebuild some of the habitats we've absolutely destroyed. Because the Greens want 50% of farms to be doing agroforestry in a decade. Now, I think there's an issue here, in that farmland may well be in use, and therefore of use to this country as a whole. Their idea, though, is that growing vegetables or raising livestock can take place between rows of trees. Farmers' Union has said this is not impossible. Now, Greens also want the UK to reduce emissions of methane from cows and sheep by phasing in a tax on meat and dairy products over 10 years, which will piss off a lot of people, so I wouldn't recommend it. Next, build 100,000 zero-carbon homes. We have a population of over 65 million, and you want to build 100,000 zero-carbon homes. Cool. I know your excuse is, we want to help the youth, which is exactly what it is, but they just want somewhere to live. It doesn't have to be a zero-carbon home, although I'm not entirely against the idea of building hovels out of mud and hay. For the youth, they've got to have that rustic look, right? 6. Scrap tuition fees. Oh dear. So this is a big offer from Greens. The cost to cover a single undergraduate year group during their whole time at university costs £9 billion. To write off the existing debt for graduates is £33 billion. Ooh, Nelly, that's a big bill to just wipe out. And fund. How are you going to fund universities? Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. It is further education for a reason. University is not a human right, it is a privilege. That's going to annoy somebody, I know. Next, fund a basic income of £89 for everyone, which is, regardless of their income, a universal basic income for all adults is given to them of £89. This would be extra for families with children and pensioners who would get £178, which is currently £10 more than the current state pension. Now, it is expensive because it is costed at £86 billion, on top of current pension and benefit spending of £256 billion. Opponents of this have said welfare arrangements would more efficiently help those who need it most. And I tend to agree. I don't support the idea of a basic income, because I don't need the extra £89 a week. I don't like the idea of the government saying, here, have something to live on. But that's for me because I work. I like working. I don't need to be given money from the government. Nor do I want it, for that matter. I know there are others who will say, oh, I'll take that extra 89 quid. Sure, yeah, I'll have it. No, not me. Keep it away from me. Next, improve energy efficiency in millions of homes. This idea is to increase and improve the insulation around homes that have yet to be improved upon. There's no policy indication whether or not this affects those that have bought homes. Cavity insulation is one, improving loft insulation another, energy efficient light bulbs, although most have that now anyway. Next, ban single-use plastic. Now, for the most part, a lot of that is being phased out in shops anyway, where you are now offered bags for life, or Durabags from Aldi. Yeah, they're actually called Durabag. Or you have those bags that carry bags. They're a different material, and they do biodegrade when sent to landfill or wherever they're sent to. Obviously, more needs to be done for packaging in shops, and I hope over time that is something that is addressed. Next, invest £4.5 billion a year in social care. The intention being free personal care at home for people aged 65 and over. I can't wait to get to 65 then, just so I can have someone come by and wipe my bottom. Next, spend £2.5 billion on cycle routes. Now, there has been an increase over the years of cycle routes being created so cyclists not only had a designated space on the road, but also cycle paths that are away from the road so they can cycle safely to and from A to B, or for luxury's sake. I'm not against this. However, there is a huge debate whether or not they should pay road tax, since there are a number of those routes that are in fact on the road. The answer is yes, by the way. If you're going to pay tax for cars, then the cyclist who is using the road as well should of course pay to use it. And in before anyone else says it, taxation is theft. Yo, in it. Next. Oh, by the way, transport is partially devolved, but overall policies on UK rail and road network are dealt with by the UK government. Thought you'd like to know this. They also want to scrap HS2, which I don't support. Next, scrap first past the post and replace it with a fair and proportional alternative. That's interesting. The reason for this, by the way, is because the Green Party in 2017 won 500,000 votes but have one MP elected. This is the same with UKIP getting 4 million votes but only having one seat as well. So, I'll be brutally honest, given that and the other option you're presenting, the popular vote instead, there would be no need to have MPs campaign in regions, because instead it all comes down to how many voted, and therefore we'll just give seats and they won't represent an area, which is the whole bloody point of them existing in the first place. Now, voting reform is popular amongst the smaller parties, and understandably so, but this is the only issue that unites the Green Party, the Liberal Democrats and the Brexit Party. Introducing an alternative vote system, which would rank candidates, which was actually introduced in 2011, 67% of people voted against it. It's clearly not something they support. The reason we have an MP in a constituency is that we can take our issues directly to them when it affects our constituency, and they can then raise it in Parliament or tackle the issue for us. I know this because Charlie Elphicke was my MP. His wife is now running in his seat because he is facing a number of, well, he's been charged with a few crimes and we have to wait and see how that plays out. But when my mum died, I reached out to him to make sure my sister didn't lose her home, because she shared it with my mother and my mother was on the tenancy. My sister now owns that house because Charlie stepped in and helped, earning that vote in 2017. That doesn't make anyone a Conservative, by the way. It is simply a loyalty thing. We'll certainly see how his thing plays out. Maybe I'll cover that tomorrow so you can understand the full scope and grasp of what is going on. But since the media isn't reporting on it, because until something actually is given and concluded and everything, we can never truly know what has happened until then. With the Greens party policies, I'm interested to know what you think. I personally don't think they have much in the way of a chance of winning more than one seat. They've always held the Brighton seat for a while. It's their only seat, and they've done fantastic work.